Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. Little after 10. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. And sorry about I don't have any more light. I guess I should have gone in the kitchen, but I'm at home. I'm at my sister's today. I call myself picking the most comfortable chair, and it's kind of dark in here. But anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. On last week, excuse me, on Monday, the last time we were together, we were trying to understand Genesis 4 and looking at Eve and what she said when the Lord, with the help of the Lord, I have a man child or a man son. And Pastor opened that up and went in to talk about Cain and Abel. Any questions about that before we get into other questions? Because I have a question someone sent me. We'll talk about that, but I want to see if there are any questions about what we discussed Monday. Any questions about any of that?
Hey, Ron, this is Charles. I got a
Hey,
question to that.
yes, sir.
My question, when uh when uh when she said that, and I went look back over to it, but my question is in another part of that in Genesis. Um, my question is, how can I say this formula? After she had said that, and I had read a little bit more that Abel was a herdsman, a tender of the sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. And I went back to look at that again. I might have to get more understanding to it. The way I was seeing it, that the sheep represent us as being sheep, and
Say
I
that
was
one more
seeing
time,
that it
Charles.
was
What'd you say now? The
the
sheep
sheep.
represent what? Uh-huh.
I didn't get to finish what I was saying. I was saying most of what I was saying about the sheep represent us, because you remember through the Bible
Okay.
that God called us sheep,
Yes.
and I was getting understanding that okay, that's something spiritual, but I don't know how Cain, not Cain, yes, Abel becomes the tender of sheep, and I'm and just like when God asked not God, Jesus asked Jesus, do you love me? And Jesus said, yes, I love you. He said, tend my sheep. And making it a little bit more shorter, Cain was a tiller of the ground. And I went back and looked at it too. The ground means consciousness. So he was the tiller of the consciousness. And as I was looking at that, and ground do represent consciousness. And I hope you'll be able to help me to straighten it out. And they had strife between each other, consciousness against the spiritual. And not only that, I went through looking at some more. Abraham and Lot had that same strife. So what is this telling us? Y'all understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm
Charles.
I'm saying
Pastor, Pastor, would you like to explain that, please? Answer Charles' question. Yeah.
I see
Please,
what
sir.
I do. Both of them to contention, and if you notice it, both of them are both of them deals with us internally, which means that why did Abraham and Lot have to separate? Because Lot wanted land separate from Abraham because he felt like Abraham had more land or the better portion of land. And Abraham basically told him, you make a choice about what you want to do. So when Lot made that choice, he ends up at Sodom, at the gate of Sodom. So what I'm saying in essence is that you have to make a choice about which awareness or consciousness that you're going to choose, whether you're going to choose the pathway of righteousness or whether you're going to choose the pathway of selfishness. In the case of Cain and Abel, these were also contentious in that Cain speaks to a spear or some aggression, and Abel sees more of the life in the earth in terms of earth consciousness, because it says that he gave a blood offering, and the scripture clearly talks about their life being in the blood. So both of them were more in tuned to the earth consciousness. Now, let me back up and say this. These two are not physical men. These are allegories about the duality of our consciousness. And we have a choice. We can follow the pathway of religion, or we can follow the pathway of selfishness, something that we've chosen for ourselves, and be aggressive about pushing our thoughts on someone else. And when we look at what the end of what happened with Cain and Abel is that before Abel could even, well, I can't say that because it's not a man. I don't want to say that. Before the consciousness that Abel had of religion could ever move him to a place of spiritual understanding or awareness, he was killed, meaning that that consciousness was the life was taken out of that consciousness, and the consciousness of the aware of doing things, or the desire of doing things the way you want to do it in an aggressive manner, prevailed over the religious attitudes of that Abel represented, and both of those came to fruition in Seth. And at this point, that's who we are, Seth, because what we are doing is wrestling with our religious attitudes, and we are actually laying the aggressiveness to rest, meaning we're not pushing forward like we've experienced some people doing. I see the charismatic attitudes being aggressive because that is the word, church, and they know more than anybody else, and they have a blessed day, but you don't, that kind of thing. That's the aggression that I see in Cain. And the subtlety of religion is what I see represented by Abel. And when Seth has to make a choice, because the Abel and the Cain are actually in the same realm of thought for humanity. And Seth gives us an opportunity to make a choice between the spiritual nature as well as and the aggressive nature. Because if you remember, the consciousness of that Abel represented was buried deeply, and the consciousness that Cain represented remained and had offsprings that desired to do things the way they wanted to do it, and they persevered in that manner. until the languages were changed. Does that help you, Charles?
Yes, sir. That helps.
I hope so.
Thank you.
I sound convincing.
Let me ask a question, Pastor, relating to this then. Before it got to Seth, it went through a genealogy, right? It went through, does that genealogy represent the struggle? Does that genealogy represent the path to getting to Seth, to becoming a Seth? Because again, in chapter 5, it goes through a genealogy again. So is that showing that the struggle that man has trying to find himself early, is that what that about?
If we look at the genealogies, and look up the names of the people in that quote unquote bloodline, those meanings of those names will tell us about the struggles that we have gone through and are going through in order to get to that place, where the Creator says, you know what, enough is enough. You got to make a choice now. Are you going to pursue, for lack of a better term at this moment, righteousness, or are you going to continue to do things on your own? And I do believe that at that point, the religious attitude surfaces, and all of a sudden something clicks, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to church, and that prevails until you get to the place where you say, this is not really making sense, and you begin to ask questions, and that's when Seth comes into play. Does that make sense, sir?
Yes,
You muted.
it does. It does. Thank you.
Any questions about that, comments?
I have a question. How come these are all males? Didn't they have some other children? And
That's
what's that trying to tell us, that they're all males?
Yeah, it's funny you raise that question, because one of the questions that I was sent was, why was Jesus born a man instead of a woman? Why did it have to be a male? I think it's indicative of where we are now. I think it's a message from the beginning of the struggles that we were going to have with masculinity. I believe that was a warning. That was something to make us aware of the contentious struggle that we were going to have before we got to a place of embracing who we really are. And if you remember, we really didn't get to this place of even seeing with the clarity that we all came and embracing that until we settled within ourselves the issue of femininity, meaning that being expressive of the respect for it. And also, I think it's dual. I think it's dual because the names that were given is masculine, as well as the pronouns of masculine. And men are the ones who were the translators of the scriptures. And because of that, everything in the scripture that is in control is male dominated. So I do believe that we are living that right now as we speak. So that's why I think it's a male. I also believe it's a male because the male is the seed, and and the maleness of it, or the masculinity in this seed, it was aggressive to the point where it made every effort to bring into this earth everything that it wanted, everything it felt was necessary for it to progress. And I believe that came from the enmity between when it says that for you and your masculinity and femininity will have enmity towards each other. That struggle was being won, and the male pretty much came out on the side of being dominant as a male. Yet The female is the one, the femininity is the one that brought the balance to the relationship. When you look at the wives, Rebecca, Rachel, Sarah, all these brought that spiritual balance to the relationship. Does that make sense, Audrey? I see you, Ron.
I guess.
No, it doesn't. Let me say it another way. All I'm saying is this, that this is a precursor to what we're dealing with. So the maleness of it, who translated the Bible? Men. Where the greatest issues come from? Men. So if we take that and look at it spiritually, the Creator is saying that masculinity is going to exert itself in a dominant way, and to temper that is going, femininity is going to have to temper that. And the way that is done, if you look at history, you will see that it was always femininity that tempers the aggressiveness in society. Even if we look at what happened during the onset of slavery in South Carolina in particular, because this was the dominant place for it. When they meaning these owners were deciding that they were going to do rice paddies, raise rice, cultivate rice, they brought the men in because they felt like the brute strength of the men was necessary in order for them to till the ground in terms of building levees and dikes to control the water flow. But what they found out was it wasn't the men; the engineers were the females. So what did they do? They tempered. They moved the males to a different place, and the females were the ones who not only organized but tilled the rice as well. What is that saying to me? That's saying to me that when femininity is in the place where the Creator intended for it to be, and that is a place of leadership and guidance, when it's in that place where it Creator intended for it to be, then you begin to produce what you are attempting to bring into existence. It happens. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but that's not exactly what the Bible teaches.
I know, exactly. And it doesn't teach that based upon interpretations, because even the Bible calls the Holy Spirit a he when it's a she. So that's why we go back to the original text and do our best to glean from it what was the original intent when the scrolls were written. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can it also be that God is saying to us, I showed you how to do this. Now it is your responsibility to find your femininity. You have been shown who you are. And so now you are to open yourself up to find who you are and find your balance. And that is a part of the awakening of Adam. And that's what we are doing now. So I agree with everything you said. I guess putting in a little different words. Does that make sense?
It does. What we're seeing here is the entity. The entity of what was brought into existence, the masculinity was dominant from the beginning. Elohim brought into existence this entity called Adam. And the mindset of the Adam was spelled out to us in the description of what took place. For this cause shall a man leave, blah, 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 and this woman you gave me. This it was shown to us because in order for there to be harmony in the earth, then there has to be balance between masculinity and femininity. I did not say equality. I said balance between the two, because whatever it takes to bring balance is not predicated on equality. It may be 30-50, 30-70, it may be 40-60, whatever it takes to bring that balance. And that balance has not existed with mankind from the period when religion came into existence until now. And even prior to that, if we look at the societies that existed in the past, what were we, prior to rather, the invasions and the overshadowing of the spiritual nature of who we were during this era, what we will see is that femininity was not dominant, but there was a balance between femininity and masculinity in Egypt prior to the invasion. So what I'm saying is that since that, we have not experienced that kind of balance before. Since then. And now I'm not talking about what's in Genesis. I'm talking about what predated Genesis. And what predated Genesis was what Egyptian creation, for lack of a better term, it was the place of Ptah that brought everything into existence. And what we have been trying to make help us understand is that the Bible that we read is the allegory that drew the writings from the Egyptian scrolls. And when it drew the writing from the Egyptian scrolls, what happened? When these writings took place, there was already a presence in the lives of the ones who wrote these scriptures of those the male-dominant society that invaded the land of Ptah during that period. So we are now at the place where we are supposed to bring the balance into the earth that existed prior to 10,000 years ago. If you read the history of the kingdom of the Cushites, those are the first kingdoms to ever exist on the earth. They were balanced. The invasion, they were no longer balanced. The Eurasians who invaded, that imbalance was fostered during that period. The reason that we have such a problem wrapping our mind around it is because we are only familiar with the Bible, and everybody's mind, not everybody, but most people's minds are closed to the reality that something existed prior to the writings of what we call the New Testament and the Old Testament. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's not that balance was never here. It's that balance was destroyed.
I think if you look at the spiritual concept of marriage, there really is two deaths, or should be two deaths. The death of the male and the female. In other words, I give up my ambitions, I give up being me in order to become one with you. And whatever that balance looks like, as you say, it may be 7-30, might be 60-40 in any given situation. And I think even when we say, I give up my free will, I don't think you give it up as much as you are transforming it. That is a way of saying, I transform it, I give up these ambitions because I recognize or see the more. I don't see it as in clarity. I see it with my eye. I know that it's there and I can become more. So I think too that is what we're in the process of doing, uh, finding that balance, understanding what that balance look like and being comfortable with it. And in the process, we are awakening and becoming one, becoming in rhythm, not only with each other, but with the universe. So,
You know what Jesus said? And the two shall become one.
yeah.
He was not talking about marriage in the way we talk about marriage. Jesus was talking about the two become one. What does that mean? That means that this entity, Adam, saw a separation within itself, and it had to, with a clarity, merge or bring back into existence its thoughts or its recognition of the unicity of male and female energy, of masculinity and femininity. And the two shall become one, speaks to the idea of being inextricably entwined with each other, meaning that the masculine and feminine cannot exist without each other. So I do not think that Jesus was talking about a marriage in terms of someone standing in front of a priest getting married. And the reason I say that is because there is no prescription for marriage in the scriptures at all, for marriage as we say. There is no prescription at all in the scriptures for that. If that was the case, then why is it that we have so many methods of marriage? Why is that so? And why is it that it takes the intimate entwining of the two entities to produce what we call a marriage, the consummation? That's based on spiritual consummation. It has nothing to do with the physicality of it all, because if it had everything to do with the physicality of it all, then how many times would you have been married? So this is Jesus talking about something spiritual. Matter of fact, everything that Jesus is talking about is physical, but because of the static mindset that masculinity brought into the equation with its aggressiveness, we don't see any further than that. But if we see the fluidity of spirituality, then we are able to see more clearly that we are talking about the awakening of Adam. That's what Jesus is talking about, the awakening of Adam. And Adam cannot be awakened until Adam recognizes the what? The relation, the depth of the relationship between masculinity and femininity in terms of bringing balance to the earth. That's what the awakening is speaking to. Does that make sense? Because it says that if you look at, and the sleep came over him, it says that he was unconscious, which means that he was unaware of consciousness. So anyway, questions or comments?
I have a question.
oh.
I'm sorry, I yield.
Well, let me just say, as Pastor Richard said, this is 10,000 years of confusion that is we're trying to rectify, in a sense, on a global sort of collective consciousness scale. The people in most need of correction as time seems to accelerate is the masculine energy, because the masculine energy, if it messes up, is more destructive than feminine. And these are archetypes I'm speaking about. So we both possess, or we both contain masculine and feminine properties, and it's about finding that balance within us. But in terms of the way this is playing out, I believe in the history of the development of consciousness on this earth, as time accelerates, as we get closer and closer to an inflection point or transition point for a very large amount of people, the ones who need to make sure they are right and get it correct more so than ever are men, or it is that masculine consciousness. Because, as I said, it's more destructive when it is confused and egotistical. But if it is harmonious and balanced and in resonating in tune with what femininity is, then the path through that period of transition is that much quicker. It can be accelerated that much more greatly. So this era of history I believe we're in is one that requires essentially men to get it right. In previous eras of history, where we were not so out of balance, maybe previous to 10,000 years or whatever era of history, I believe very strongly that you would have seen the female equivalent of a Jesus figure multiple times throughout the world, because femininity was more recognized for what it is. It was not a sort of descent into confusion and ignorance, which is what we are, transitioning out of very slowly. Well, quicker and quicker, but it's still the beginning part of that transition in terms of global consciousness, I believe. So before things were written down, guaranteed there were women doing the exact kinds of things that we associate with the male figures in pretty much every religion. Thank you.
Nick, thank you, Nick. That's one of the reasons I reference the period prior to the advent of the scriptures. In that period I reference a lot is what we call the Egypt experience, because during that period, that's exactly what was happening, as Nick stated, that that was the period where everything had its origin, and so I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and we absolutely have little pockets across the globe where that time period was remembered, including in Egypt for a time. And other matriarchal societies across the planet are, in a sense, a remembrance of that sort of more natural, harmonious order. Yeah.
Right.
But even in the times of the Hebrews later on, when Jesus, the entity that's referred to as Jesus, lived, there was that opportunity with the entity Mary Magdalene to begin to breach that gap of the distance between masculine and feminine, masculine energy and feminine energy. And look how difficult it has been for us to just accept the possibility that those two were one and the same. And even after the supposed death or transition of the masculine, with the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's difficult for people to even grasp that today. So therein, the Mary Magdalene entity represented the femininity and the feminine part of the Jesus entity, in a sense. But even then, it's difficult to put the two together.
And that is that in itself is reflective of what Nick and I were talking about during this 10,000-year period or whatever the time frame is. We have been indoctrinated to the point where marriage is everything, yet it was wrong for Jesus to have been married. That came from Catholicism, that he could not have been married. According to the scriptures, you could not be a rabbi without being married. You could not be a teacher of the scriptures without being married, that kind of thing. If we were to reference the meanings of the names as opposed to the name, for example, if we were to say the deliverer came from the womb of femininity, came from the womb of despair. Mary or Miriam speaks to the idea of being in a state of flux or despair. So out of the womb of despair comes what? Deliverance. So instead of talking about Jesus being born from the womb of Mary, we talk about the word of understanding for the spiritual understanding for the purpose of delivery came from the womb of disparity, or from the womb of conflict, from the womb of confusion. If we look at it the way it was intended to be looked at, then we see something different. Does that make sense, Barbara Jane? If you're speaking, you're muted. Hello?
Speak. Did that make sense, Barbara?
Oh yeah. And marriage. I mean, this physical thing we see as marriage is only a spiritual is a representation of the spiritual. That spiritual being, the reconnection, the merger of masculine and feminine energy within each of us.
Thank you.
Maybe a little. I have a question.
Hey, Ron.
Yes, sir.
Evelyn had a question.
You're right. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's a lot need to be said. But anyway, when you guys were talking about the entity atom, the word atom, ATOM, came to mind. And then I looked up and I said, well, what is an atom? And it says that it is, what's what I had? It said a central nucleus that is surrounded by one or more negatively charged electrons. And then at the very end of the paragraph, it says atoms are the basic building blocks of matter. Does that have anything to do with what we're talking about this morning?
Absolutely. The word Adam comes from Atum, which is the Egyptian god that brought everything into existence. Atum. Yes. It's a basic building. Yeah.
Okay.
And Pastor,
Thank
if I
you.
may, good morning, everyone. This is George Philly. Also, Evelyn, when you spoke about the atom, and Pastor mentioned a tune, when you mentioned the word matter, it all started, with the waters of Nun, which is matter. And that matter, connected with Ptah, the energy that was in motion, which created the created word. So again, what you're speaking about definitely has relevance. It all started back in the beginning when we talk about the first Trinity in terms of Nun, Ptah, and Atum. So I just wanted to share those thoughts because it's all connected to matter, which was there before the beginning. Just wanted to share those thoughts, Pastor. I'm done.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Nick. All of those things are connected. The names, I should say, Miriam or Mary and matter. In the Hindu Sanskrit tradition, or in the Buddhist tradition coming out of India, the name Maya is the same. It means illusion, or like the place of turmoil or confusion. It's the realm of matter. And it is the masculine force, and these are archetypes that enlivens or redeems the realm of illusion. It's the water turning to wine. It's the Jesus being married to Mary or Miriam, etc. And that archetypal relationship is present throughout all spiritual metaphysical tradition, and then religion is built on top of that. As Pastor just said, Atum is the Egyptian god, and when the European scientists were well aware of all of these things, and that's why they named these things after sort of mythology and stuff that they were aware of. But what they did not know is that they were recreating that same relationship based on an instinctual remembrance of the sort of fundamental nature of reality and the relationship between masculinity and femininity, even within the context of their materialism. So the Atum also means the one thing. It's one indivisible thing, the ultimate foundation, and that's why they named, or what they thought at the time, the atom after Atum. Anyway, all of these things are related, and this instinctual remembrance of these fundamental principles always comes through and remains as we learn about reality, and this information is passed down, even though it changes and transitions depending on the nature of the consciousness in a particular era of history. Thank you.
Nick, I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
That's the same, I think, well, I know I believe. It's the same thing as, and the earth was without form and void.
Yeah.
It was in a state of confusion. It's talking about matter being in a state of confusion, meaning that it could become anything that the creator determined it to be. So Genesis is also talking about the same matter that you and Evelyn were talking about earlier. So it's the same principle. They are over thousands of years between the writings of what we deem to be the Bible and what transpired in Egypt. Over the thousands of years, there were those who made an effort to recreate what they had learned in Egypt. I'm done.
Yep, absolutely. A very obvious example of that is masonry, the Masons. 90% of what they got is straight out of Egypt. If you go down 16th Street here in DC and you see the Grand Lodge of whatever, they have sphinxes out front, all that.
Yeah. And what happened when Nick talks about masonry and all of that, what masonry actually did was corrupt the mystical nature of what happened in Egypt. It was totally corrupted, and it's very difficult to see that if you don't understand what masonry is all about. You can read the Duncan's Ritual and still you don't know what it's talking about unless you have been involved with masonry. So all of these things or corruptions of what happened in the beginning. I think I heard George.
Good morning, everyone. Based on what Mr. Charles stated early at the beginning, and I really don't know what this has to do with masculine energy or feminine energy, yet one of the things I want people to at least know as it relates to Cain and Abel, Cain had a pretty difficult assignment. He had to till the soil. And I'm not going to say his task was more difficult than his brother or less difficult. Yet, one thing that I do want you to know is when you work on the farm, your assignment is it's never complete, yet it's not incomplete because there's always something to do working on the farm. And inclement weather does not stop what you have to do. And when you deal with a person who has farm strength, that means mentally they are very strong. And you don't see a person's mental strong. Now, you see a bodybuilder's definition of body, whether it be male or female, and we can assume that they're strong. Yet mental strong is something that you don't see. And if you ever got to deal with a person that's farm strong, you will never forget that experience. I remember Ron he stated there was a guy on the University of Nebraska that played nose guard. He was 160 pounds. You couldn't do nothing with him. Yet he could do something with the center, the tackle, the guard. So when you are farm strong is something that you cannot see with your eye. And a good example of being farm strong and mental strong is my brother-in-law, Junior. Big, burly guy, but that joker got some strength that I've never seen before, and it's not strength that comes from the weight room. It's strength that comes from taking the engine out of a car by yourself, changing a tire on a 18-wheeler tire on the interstate. So this thing of mental strength, you're not going to see it now. You're not. Yet if you ever get entangled with it, you will know the difference between physical strong and mental strong. Now, Reb and the rest of y'all, I don't know what that got to do with masculine energy and feminine energy. Just wanted y'all to know that. But if one of y'all can tie it in, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
There is one thing I'd like to mention that you said, George. You talk about you said Cain had the hardest job. I think we get the idea sometimes that what those, again, they're not men. These are not people we're talking about, but cultivating the ground and the keeper of the flock. We look at those as maybe these were punishments for what had happened. This relating to the quote unquote fall, but God said to man before there was a fall that you would be cultivating the ground. So you made me look that up in chapter 2 of Genesis. It talks about I lost it. Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden to cultivate it and keep it. So he was supposed to cultivate that particular ground, and he failed to do so. So let's cultivate a little bit. Pastor, you probably went into that Monday, but go into that and the expansion of it, because you was first told to cultivate that which was in the garden, and now we find with Cain and Abel. Tie that together for us, if you don't mind. Are you
Are
talking
you asking what does cultivated mean in that regard?
what it means, what it means, and yeah, let's start there, please.
Okay, well, what we are actually doing now is cultivating the consciousness, meaning that our objective is to sow seeds or to plant seeds. Sowing seeds means you throw them in any place and they grow. So we are sowing seeds, and in doing so, when we come back with our responses to questions and explaining in detail as much as we can what that means when we talk about the entity Adamo, Jesus, or whomever. That in itself is the cultivation of our mindsets. It's attempts to cultivate the soul so it can be what it was intended to be, as opposed to cultivating the mind. What we've done in the past is cultivated the mind through academia. We cultivated the mind through with our eyes by what we see and experience in this earth. But the cultivation of us spiritually is done with the eye and the desire to know and embrace who you are. So we are in a continuous state of cultivation, as opposed to get into a place where there is no longer a need to cultivate. I hope I'm answering what you're asking, Ron.
Okay. I just want to tie those two things together, looking at, Cain and Abel, and going back to man's first direction that he got from his creator.
So the spiritual nature of what was created and done, the spiritual nature of it is cultivation. The body that the spirit lives in is adverse to spiritual cultivation, because the dominant site or experience in the body is material as opposed to spiritual. And in order for us to be able to truly embrace the nature of the essence of what we were created to be, we have to first get past who we think we are so we can be what we were created to be. And at that point, we began to see with the eye, or at the very least, make every effort to understand spiritually, which begins to open the eye so we can see spiritually. And when we do that, we begin to see that those things that we have been cultivating that are material are temporal. And they have the only effect that they really have is to satisfy our material desires. However, when we began to see with the spiritual eye, we began to see that whatever we cultivate is for the whole of humanity. And the continuation of that pathway of cultivation makes our eye clearer, and the scales begin to fall from the eye, and we are able to see much clearer what spirituality is. And doing so and speaking about it and questioning it and responding to those questions is the actual cultivation for humanity, what we call putting it in the macro. And if you can envision the macro as being a type of ground that you plant seeds in, what we are actually doing is sowing seed into the macro, that we, from the understandings of the eye, what the eye sees, the wisdom of it all, as opposed to what the eyes see. Because what the eyes see only cultivates religion, or it cultivates a desire, or cultivates greed, or anything that is in this material world. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you. I had a question too that someone sent me, and it's on the, I think be a good place to ask it here. The question asks, what does it mean when we talk about the universe or talk to the universe? So what is, talk about the universe. What is the universe, and what are we doing when we address the universe? You just mentioned the macro. Can you tie those things together, please?
The when we talk about the universe, we began with, I think we began where this concept emanated. We talk about our ancestors in conjunction with the universe, because the universe itself, when Jesus says, I see what my Father says, Jesus saying, I see what the universe is saying. So when we talk about the universe, we are talking about a place where all wisdom and energy emanates from. The wisdom is housed in the universe, and that is the reason when we talk about a womb, is males translated that as father when it should have been translated as universe or male female. In other words, it should have been translated as universe or Adam. Because if a womb is male and female, that's Adam, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about the universe, we're talking about the storage place for wisdom and energy. When we talk about drawing from the universe, we don't actually draw like we would draw water from the well. What we actually do is be still and know that you're God. Be still and know that you're Elohim. Be still and know who you are. And that in itself results in an understanding of universal principles that we call wisdom. And this wisdom comes from a womb that has the ability to birth understanding. So we are not talking about simply the stars or the celestial bodies, because all of the celestial bodies represent energy as well. They represent light in the midst of darkness, the light in the midst of wisdom. If we look at it from the perspective of our ancestors become one with the universe. They become a bridge between the universe and us. The reason they are a bridge between the universe and us is because they are more in tune after exiting the body with the universe than we are within these bodies. And when we talk about the idea of ancestral guidance, we are talking about the energy that we are familiar with, because we are that energy as well, guiding us to a place of understanding, guiding us to the place where we realize that all of us are one. So universe is far more than what we have been taught in school that the universe is. It is the spiritual essence of the Creator that was brought into play for the purpose of those of us who are in this earth in bodily form. I hope that's not confusing. And if someone can state it differently, please do that. And the one whomever sent the question to Ron, if you don't want to speak, would you send the question back to him, or if it makes sense?
I have a question.
Send that answers.
Yeah, I just asked the question, does this make sense? Or does it answer your question? So hopefully I get it soon.
Say again?
I have a question.
Hold one
So,
second. 1 second,
uh-huh.
please. 1 second, please.
No,
Ron, what did you get?
I was just saying, I just text the person to ask, did this answer your question? You know, do you need more clarity or are you good with this? So hopefully they'll get back with me.
Okay, go ahead.
So are you saying the universe is in us?
I'm saying
That
that we are the universe and the universe is us.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
See, we were housed in these bodies for a reason. And the reason we were housed in these bodies was not to get rich. We were housed in these bodies in order for us to become in the earth what the Creator is above. As above, so is below. That came out of Egypt. And in order to, or it came out of the Cushite kingdom, in order to have a book, in order to see this, to become as above, so is below, in order for us to fulfill that, education was instituted. And education was instituted for the express purpose of knowing God, or knowing Ptah, or knowing Elohim, knowing who we are. That was the purpose of education, to realize that we are the same as the entity that created us. However, our eyes, with education, as we have seen it in the last 10,000 years, not 10,000, I'm sorry, probably in the last, 4,000 years, 2,000, 4,000 years, something like that, between 2,000 and 4,000 years, has been based upon what we see with our eyes and not what we experience with our eye. So it has not been geared toward knowing who you are. It's been geared toward elevating yourself above everyone who don't know what you know, or who don't understand what you understand. So when you say, when you talk about us, the reason when I talk about us being in these bodies, that is for us to be creators, just like the universe is, just like the entity that brought us into existence is creator as well. And it is indeed the universe that brought us into existence, because it is the source of all the energy that is pervasive in the earth itself. The energy of the universe is no different than the energy of Elohim, Ptah, however you want to call it, because all of these, whether it's Ptah or Elohim, these are not proper names. These are descriptions of the elements that brought us into existence, the elements that we are to become aware that we are even in these bodies. And when we become aware of that, we end up like Enoch, or we end up like what Jesus did. What we end up being deliverers. And when we are fully engaged with that, then we have the opportunity to move from one place to another. In other words, we have the opportunity to choose to become pure energy, and are able to reconstitute it wherever we desire to be. So that it is. This is if you know who you are, if we follow the prescription of knowing that we are God, of knowing that we are Elohim, however you want to term it, if we embrace that fully, then everything that we are in need of in terms of sustaining the bodies, we can bring it into existence. We can bring it to us by virtue of being returning to the concept of being a community, because one yet many speaks to I am one in a community. And a community is no different than the cells in your body. A community, one cell in your body needs every cell in your body. And every cell in your body needs that one cell. You cannot separate them, because if you do, something is wrong with the body itself. So something is wrong with the community, because the one cell that was in this community made a decision that it was going to take everything from the community and give nothing back to the community. And that in itself is the spiritual sickness that we are experiencing right now. I hope that helps. I hope that brought some understanding. And if it didn't, please raise a question or say you don't understand and someone can help you, I hope. Kathy, what to see?
Yeah, I understand. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anyone else?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, one of the things I want to say is just about cultivating the land, cultivating the earth, or cultivating your arena. There are two activities that I can do to cultivate whatever arena I am. One is by active participation, and the other is by no participation at all. Both are very beautiful, both are very ugly, both are very indifferent. And what I mean by that is I listened to the interview between Shannon Sharpe and Monique earlier this week. Tyler Perry never said that Monique was difficult to work with. That was said by Oprah and Lee Daniels. Yet Tyler Perry never did say you can work with her. And this is coming by 50 Cent, Curtis Jackson. He said that he had a conversation with Tyler Perry. He said, hey, man, you got influence. No, you didn't say she's difficult to work with. However, you did not say you can work with her. By keeping your mouth shut, you also cultivated the land. What Lee Daniels and Oprah said, they also cultivated the land. So if you're going to cultivate the soil, it comes by a degree of participation, and it also comes by a degree of not participating. The things that I elect not to say is just as powerful as the things that I will say or the things that others say. The things that I will not say are just as powerful, and vice versa. So if you're going to cultivate the soil or whatever arena you're in, it can come by no participation at all or by participation. That's it. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to respond to that because the arena that you're talking about is this earth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the cultivation of spirituality. The earth, we always cultivate it. And it end up, when we're cultivating it, without understanding who you are, it end up being selfish, or it end up being a desire to control people. And whether or not you're aware of it, that's exactly what you're doing. So when we talk about spiritual cultivation, it is for the purpose of everyone receiving, as opposed to the desire to control. Now, by participation, first of all, the only person that you are obligated to cultivate is you. If you cannot cultivate you by virtue of understanding or desiring to understand the wisdom of spirituality, then you will remain blind spiritually and with sight materially. And that when that happens, it is extremely difficult for you to embrace spirituality, because you continue to see things in material, religious, governmental, sociological ways, as opposed to seeing it through spirituality. Once I remember saying that the day is going to come where we are going to begin to think spiritually, just like we are talking spiritually. Our processing now is spiritual as opposed to processing academically. And if you don't process spiritually, you will you will find it improbable, if not impossible, to communicate spiritually. So it is mandatory that we cultivate ourselves first in terms of our desire to embrace the spiritual nature of our being, so that we are able to communicate with the universe and receive, or to see rather, become aware of what the universe / ancestors are saying to us. Does that make sense?
Yes. George?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Thank you.
Does it? Is everyone else in line with what Reverend Richard stated? I'm just seeking. That's all.
It's fine, George. But everybody on this line is aware that they can respond to anything or raise a question about anything. So this, solicitation of that puts people on the spot. And I really don't like putting people on the spot. I think people should have their own free will without feeling pressured to respond to anything.
Anyone else? Any follow-ups?
This is Angela. I have a
Angela.
question. Hey, everybody. Can you I need more clarity on spirituality versus time, but there's no time in spirituality.
Nick made a statement earlier about the rapid pace of how things are happening now, how time seems to have sped up. I think that's what you're referencing. Am I right, Nick, when you make that statement?
Yep.
So when we talk about spirituality versus, I tell you what, since you brought it up, Nick, you deal with it, please.
Sure. Time is purely a perception. It does not exist outside of our own awareness of what appears to be time passing. When your awareness expands to contain more of what this spiritual reality is, your sense of time also changes. So when I mentioned that time appears to be speeding up, that's because our individually and collectively, our awareness is essentially processing more things more quickly. Events that affect our own lives as well as our collective experience seem to happen more quickly. That is purely because of that awareness that we have individually and collectively. A way to think of the other realms that we speak of, like the spirit realms, etc., is that those are a even more sped up realm than this one. So when we talk about the material or the earth, it is in a way a lot slower than the realms that exist beyond this material experience. So spirit, relative to matter, is moving much quicker. So when your awareness expands, you also move that much more quickly, and your sense of time changes as a result. But time is only relative to your own sense of awareness. So it can be experienced very differently depending on where you are coming from, whether you are within this experience of physical material matter, or whether you are outside of it, quote unquote. Now, all of these realms that I'm speaking of are all here at present now. The difference between them in terms of our experience is one, again, of perception. There is no sort of real separateness between them. Rather, there is our own ability to see or not see them, or to interact with or not interact with them. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
I have another question. So when Jesus was talking about the seasons, is that the same thing as what you're explaining about times? We won't look at it as far as a time when it happened, but you can notice through the spiritual awareness that it's changing without knowing this certain date or this certain time, setting the time, you become aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
okay.
You can sense what time it is just by being aware of the signs of the times, if we said, but also just paying attention to your ability to intuitively sense the environment that you're in. It's like walking into a room full of people and you can feel the vibe of those people. It's that same thing for us sort of collectively in Earth. It's the same thing for you individually in your own life and experience and in whatever communities you're a part of. It's just your ability to recognize the nature of the current of consciousness that we are currently in and where it is taking us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I want to back up a minute and look at something. Again, Nick, you, if I understood you right, you said something earlier. You talked about masculine. If messing up, it would be the more destructive thing, right? I want to talk about that for just a second. I got an example of something I saw when you said that, and y'all tell me if I'm off base. This is kind of a supposition. If you have something valuable that I want, and I decided I'm going to find a way to get it, I have two methods cross my mind. One, I can be clever and befriend you and try to do it out of deceit. Or I can set to just kill you and take what you have. Looking at those two methods, can one be masculine and one be feminine? When the scripture says, let's get the man out of here before he takes his hand and changes everything, messes up everything, was he talking to masculinity? It also brings to mind, if the serpent represents the mind, is the mind both feminine and masculine? Or let me stop there because I got a few more questions, but it's all based on.
I can
It's all
understand
based
that.
on. Does this make?
Hold 1 second, Ron. Foundation, would you mute, please? Thank you.
Does this make sense so far? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole before we may not even.
I think so.
I'm just saying, one of my questions, Nick, has always been the speaking to Eve, this thing, and I know these are not people, this is masculine and feminine energy, but I think it all had a reason and a purpose. And I'm looking at the state of the world now and the brutality of masculinity and how destructive it is when you say it that. and it made me think about this. So
Mhm.
does that make sense at all?
Yeah. The serpent presenting itself to Eve. Think about and this is not the full meaning of that, but as it relates to us spiritually, this is definitely part of it.
Okay.
You encounter things at a subconscious level that you are not aware of until they become, or until you become conscious of them. So the serpent presenting something to Eve is in a way an aspect of yourself that is receptive to whatever, receiving something and then bringing it to another aspect of yourself, the masculine part. So Eve brings the fruit to Adam. Your subconscious makes your conscious aware of a particular thing. It is then the responsibility of your conscious mind to appropriately deal with what it is you have become aware of, that thing that arose out of your subconscious. So in that example is the sort of potential for masculinity to say, no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to go in a different direction. And that sort of stopping power of masculinity, when it is confused and expressed physically, is more destructive than what femininity is.
Yeah.
So femininity can also be confused in its own way, but the way in which masculinity becomes confused is just that much more of a destructive force. And as these both masculinity and femininity, these things, these aspects of our own self become confused or become balanced depending on how we deal with them, that reflects externally. I hope that addressed the question that you had.
Yeah.
Or ask another one, but like,
yeah, it just kind of opened things up to me when you said that. It described things, the state of current affairs and the history of man. I could just see all of that in that statement and how we got to where we are.
The word Adam, when you began, when we began to see it mentioned in after the creation of male and female, when we began to see that, then it is masculine. However, when we look at the root of Adam, which is 119, it's neither masculine nor feminine. So the origin of it all is neither masculine nor feminine. So what does that mean? That means that the root, the origin of who we are, cannot be labeled as being masculine or feminine. The delineation begins when the masculine aspect recognizes the feminine presence that it is. And it is at that point that the battle begins between masculinity and femininity. And the scriptures are simply informing us about what we are going to encounter once we are in these human bodies, once we're in these material bodies. And the reason the battle rages so viciously now, and I'm not necessarily talking about physically vicious at all, but the reason it rages so viciously now is because our eyes see a man and a woman. But when we are able to see what was in the beginning, we don't see male, female separate. We see the bond between the both of them, or the unicity of both of them, that is inseparable. And that in itself removes all of these labels of duties and responsibilities that separate us. And once that happens, then we begin to regard each other in terms of this physical life as being whatever we need to be when we need to be it, Elohim. If I am unable to lift the chair and you are able, then we are the same. You're just simply being what you need to be when I need you to be it, or vice versa. So the return to the beginning of spirituality in terms of the thoughts or the entity in the mind of our Creator is one that is neither masculine nor feminine, and it is not even a hermaphrodite, because hermaphrodite speaks to having both genitalia, and this is not about genitalia at all. This is about the energy flows and the and understanding that without masculine, feminine, or negative, not negative in the way that we turn negative, but negative and positive, you cannot have a flow of energy. So when we see that we are not either masculine or feminine, we are one entity. That is the flow of energy. That plug that you put into the wall does not see itself as one entity. If it did, it would not work. It would not. It does not see itself as separate entities. If it did, it would not work. So it takes both of those going into that outlet for it to function. So right now, as much as possible, I do believe that we are to see ourselves the way we were created, and that is a spiritual entity that is neither masculine nor feminine. Does that make sense? Questions?
I have a question. If no one else does.
Okay, Rev, don't understand what you said, but I may understand what you said. How does this all relate to your MC, your moral compass? Is your moral compass, well, I mean, without feminine energy, masculine energy cannot exist. I agree with that. Yet, does your moral compass, is your moral compass more of what the individual has created, or is the moral compass feminine energy and a little bit masculine energy, or how does your moral compass play in all this?
In the beginning, you were neither male nor female. Adam was neither male nor female. Translators emphasize the difference between male and female. And when you talk about a moral consciousness, if your moral consciousness is guided by this material world, then you really don't have one, because your mind will tell you anything. If your moral compass is guided by spirituality, then your moral conscience is one of righteousness, loving kindness, etc. And it does not seek to lord itself over feminine nor masculine. It just is what it is. Does that make sense, George?
Yes and no, and I may not get it all today, but in about 2 weeks I may connect it all together. But thus far, I appreciate what you said.
Well, thank you. If someone can help, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I can help. I think So spiritually speaking, energy is neither masculine nor feminine, but it is both and neither. But when it is expressed here in this material experience as men and women, that distinction becomes obvious. And then we talk about the battle of the sexes. It then becomes a task to figure out how to harmonize the relationship between masculinity and femininity, between men and women, as well as between those aspects of your own self internally. And I've sort of recently learned like a good way, I think, to understand how to balance those within is if you are a man, you don't, in order to, if you are a man, what it means to incorporate femininity and how that affects your moral compass. If you're a man, to incorporate femininity means essentially to not suppress your own feelings and to express them in a harmonious way. And two, to have empathy for the feelings of other people. That's simple. And in terms of your moral compass, if you have empathy, if you are aware of both your own feelings and how other people feel, then that helps you move in a more moral way. If you are a woman, to incorporate the masculinity that is a part of you in a balanced way, I believe that simply means to utilize, don't be afraid to be aggressive when you know it is correct to do so. It is incorporating that drive and maybe ambition is another way to describe it. So it's understanding that those are the sort of archetypal spiritual forces that make up both men and women. But the balance within each man and woman is different, and it's about learning how to integrate those harmoniously. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Nick, as you were describing that, what I was thinking was perfectly what you actually described. And that is, George, if you can imagine parenting, while parenting, those aspects that Nick just described come out more so in a natural and uninhibited way when dealing with children. You are then what you need to be with that child, as you relate to that child, as you're sensitive to that child, as you guide that child and nurture that child all at the same time. But again, it differs and changes from moment to moment, and what you understand is actually needed. And you do that quite naturally without even thinking about it from an intellectual standpoint. You're more so driven there, or is more, I would say, it's more apt, it's easier for it to more naturally take place, as you would say, in that arena than necessarily while dealing with, others being out on the road, et cetera. You are vulnerable in a sense. And what I mean by vulnerable, you allow this thing to automatically happen without necessarily fighting it. And again, thinking about it from an intellectual standpoint, or necessarily trying to hold yourself back. It may even be the case that you do something and you may contemplate on it later on and then realize how free it was of something you did, but you did with little effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Nick, I agree with what you're saying. Yet when you said that the female can be aggressive and do it with a degree of balance, I agree with that. I just looking at my own experience, when I'm aggressive, and I can have a great deal of empathy, not everyone is going to understand it. And that's just life. It's just life. Yet life is about balance. The scale can be way too much to the left. It can be way too much to the right. It has to be a degree of balance. But it's just that word that you said, aggressive. I know you didn't mean aggressive in a way of a Bobby Knight or anything like that. You just aggressive is just, it's not looked at as something that's beautiful
Yeah.
at times. Thank you.
Right. And that's why I said maybe ambitious or to have drive might be a better way to describe it. But yes, I get what you mean. Yeah. Aggression kind of has a negative connotation, but it is a necessary fundamental force that we all have to utilize. And it's really just the drive to move from one state to another state.
Maybe persistent would be a better word. Maybe
And
being persistent.
Or
Yeah.
passion.
Mhm.
Yeah, passionate.
Yeah.
And Nick, I do appreciate the word drive a little better than aggressiveness. Yet I know you weren't talking about from a not so good spot with aggressiveness. Yet that word that you said, drive, I can identify with. Thank you.
Thank you. Were you
Oh, yeah.
saying something, Pastor?
No, I give it. I say maybe it's a good place to pause.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If there are no other questions or comments, thank you. Love the questions today. And again, keep them coming. If you have a question or a comment that you don't want to speak on the line, just send it to us. We'll read it and discuss it. Okay. Anyone else before we get out? Don't want to leave anybody.
Ron, this is Angela. I text when everybody was talking, I text Pastor Richard a question. We can be answered tomorrow. We can talk about it tomorrow, but I text him a question of the question that I had.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you don't mind, we'll start there tomorrow. Then yeah, I agree with you. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? This is a great start to the day. I hope all of you guys have a good, safe day. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Much
Have a
love,
good
y'all.
weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.